All righty. Well, welcome back to another episode of Generation to Generation Bridging the Gap with Rex.
And Eva, and we're so excited to have you back with us here. And we're talking about one of the most culturally relevant holidays in our American history, which is 4th of July. And after taking a little time off just to spend some time together as a family and celebrate me finishing high school, we're back on air, and I'm excited to get back to the routine.
Yeah, do we remember how to do this?
Clearly not by the bloopers, but
we need to make a blooper reel at the end of the year because we
I have
have
a folder.
plenty of material.
I have a folder.
But we did take some time away in June as a family. Again, congratulations, Eva, for graduating high school and a successful thesis defense. Matter of fact, shout out to Wilson Hill Academy. All of the seniors that presented thesis just did fantastic in their oral arguments. And I'm just so impressed with all of you guys. But it's just a lot of effort that goes into that in terms of the research, the preparation, writing the paper for the entire year, and then the oral defense with the Q&A session from the panelists to include guest facilitators. I don't know what you call those, guest
we call them
panelists.
guest readers, but it was awesome.
Yes.
And my school, actually won the national award for the classical oratory award, essentially whatever it was. One of my classmates, who's actually in my writing group, he and I are very good friends now because of that. He was the one who won, and so he was just, I think, in Dallas at the classical convention and gave his speech. It was just such an honor to get to watch that thesis be shaped into what it was, and then the award he won. And many of my classmates, many of the people in my writing group actually won some awards at school for theirs, and so it was very special to get to watch all of that and all of our hard work pay off.
You guys did a phenomenal job. So again, congratulations on high school graduation. I know you're excited. You move into college on the 19th of August.
Whoop, whoop.
Yeah, whoop, whoop. So we just took some time away. All that to say, we just took a little bit of time away and didn't even want the pressure of trying to get episodes ready to upload while we were gone. So anyway, here we are.
I tried to get them uploaded. But because we have 3 that are scheduled, it's reintroducing ourselves and who G to G is after a year. Hopefully a little better than our first episodes. But we recorded them before we left, so before the Memorial Day episode that's already out. And kid you not, I tried to upload them. My computer would not connect to Wi-Fi at a place, or it would not open it because it wasn't in the American soil and things like that. And so it was a lot. And by about week 1, when I got done trying, I was like, oh, well, I'll get to it later. And so they're all scheduled to go out for the next month. So we can get ahead, hopefully, so that we're not recording the same day it's due like we are today. But it's a lot of fun. So
all that to say, we are living life as a family, and it's been so fun. Really enjoyed spending the last few weeks with you and Mom, with no real emails, text, all the work schedules, all the stuff that we kind of get sucked into in our day-to-day lives. We had a blast. We were overseas.
I was going to say,
We'll save that for a later episode in terms of getting into details, but yes.
I was going to say it was nice. The most stressful thing in my life being the results of the Formula One Grand Prix and not the upcoming due dates for school.
Yeah, right. And you have become a Formula One freak.
I'm wearing
That's
my merch.
Another episode.
I'm wearing my Formula One merch. No, but yes, I was very excited that was the most stressful thing on my agenda, was spending my Sunday afternoons watching the race.
We had a great time. So it's just been a good time to relax and recoup and re-energize. And so anyway, all that to say, so the topic today is one of my favorite, which is 4th of July, the independence of America. This is our 249th birthday coming up tomorrow. And there's so much that I could say about this, Eva. I really want to keep it without getting into a lot of statistics.
Yeah, I was going to say, what y'all haven't seen is the fact that he has 20 pieces of sticky notes sitting in front of him.
You know I'm prepared. I am loaded for bear. And that's always been a habit of mine. Even if I have a 15-minute presentation, I'm going to have about 30 to 45 minutes of notes. So it's just something I've always done. I take a lot of notes. Helps me prepare for, just my thought process. But I've always said this about American history. If you do not love history, or at least have an appreciation for it, I will almost guarantee you that you did not have a good history teacher.
Yeah.
You had someone that tried to give you a bunch of facts and figures and dates, but they didn't tell you the story. And that's the important thing. In any historical narrative, what is the story of the people involved? What does it mean to us today? And so that's where we're going to try to approach this from in celebrating our 249th birthday as a nation in this episode.
I'm
That makes
excited.
sense?
It is. And I think it's really great that we're following this. Like, or what was we're following up with the Memorial Day, and we were talking about what Memorial Day is, and now we're talking about, why we shoot fireworks off. I don't know if many people, understand what the holiday represents. Some people may think it's the day America became a country. Some people may think it's the day that the war was over. It's very interesting. There's a lot of, I think, misconceptions about it. I think most people perceive it now as just a day where you go to the lake or to the beach or to the pool and you shoot off fireworks when it gets dark and barbecue and grill, but there's a lot that went into our ability to do that.
There is so much that went into our ability to do that. So let me give you always know again, I've got the sticky notes, the notepad. I'm constantly even writing as we talk. But let me give you a few statistics just to kind of to frame it up, because sometimes when we talk about history, I think that we're trying to put it in the context of the world that we live in now, and it's extremely difficult to rewind and take ourselves back, so to speak. So here's a couple of things that I would like for our audience to realize. Let's take ourselves back 49 years ago in 1776. And let's just talk about population first. What kind of people are we talking about? In 1776, the year that we created the Declaration of Independence, check this out. The global population was not even 1 billion people yet. There were only 770 million with an M people in the world. The 1 billion mark didn't happen until the early 1800s. And specifically in America, check this out. This is going to be interesting. You probably, I think some people that are not history buffs, they are thinking we had these large armies running around on the field and these massive engagements between these field armies between England and America, the colonists. Not the case. Here's some stats. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The population of America in 1776 was 2,500,000 people.
That's less than
2
Alabama.
million. That's what?
Less than Alabama now, right?
Yes, the population of Alabama is roughly 5 million. So that's a great way to put it into context. The population of America, when we're talking about its fight for independence, is less than half of the current population of the state of Alabama.
Wow.
Let that settle in for a minute. Now, here's the other piece to know about that. Out of that 2.5 million people, 500,000 or half a million were slaves at the time. Another 20% of that number, which is roughly 400,000, were what is called loyalists. They weren't for independence. They didn't want to rock the boat. They just wanted to figure it out. They wanted to continue to be loyal to England and the crown, as they referred to the royalty, to King George. And so there were 400,000 people that were loyalists. So you strip out the slave number, you strip out the loyalists, then you're really only talking about 1.6 million people that were interested in fighting this war for independence.
And that's not including the elderly,
England.
the women, and the children either. But
precisely.
I just want to say, I have a question, and this is so pop culture coded, but is the line in the Hamilton song where he goes, her husband's on the British side in Georgia trying to keep the colonies aligned, meaning that he was either a soldier or he was a loyalist?
The loyalist.
Okay.
That's what that line means.
Okay. Just piece that together from the Hamilton Aaron Burr song. And
Yeah.
And
so, culturally,
no, I was going to say,
that's where you start to piece history together.
Well, I didn't understand the full grasp of what the founding of our country truly looked like until Hamilton. I know it's not accurate, but it just helped me contextualize some of the things that happened, because like this year in school, I read the Declaration of Independence. I read the Constitution. We studied all of these things. We studied our founding fathers. but I really didn't know what to think of them until I saw Hamilton. And then when you could assign a personality to them in Hamilton, it made a lot more sense who they were in actual history because you had this little bit of foundation. And so I thought that was that makes sense now. That line makes a lot of sense now.
And I think that's great. And again, what you've done is you've attached a face and a name to the narrative. I love this, you know this. I love the statistics. I love the dates. I love trying to put it in perspective. Like, hey, the population of America was half of what the entire state of Alabama is now. I think contextually that helps people. But again, at the ultimate key is to put a story and make these people real.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about loyalists to the crown, you just have to remember, hey, everybody was not for this. And so
Yeah.
there were households that were divided. There were neighborhoods that were divided. So here's another thing that sometimes I think people forget. We say the Declaration of Independence was signed on December 4th, 1776. Most of us are taught that in our history classes. And I hope most Americans can name that date
December
if they were
4th?
asked. Huh?
December 4th?
No, July the 4th.
I thought you said December 4th. I was like,
I
what?
hope I didn't say that. I think I said July the 4th.
Okay.
But check this out. This was not a one-day event. It was not a one-year event. Process of fighting the battles between the forces of England and the American colonists up to the point that we had a ratified constitution by the 13 colonies was a depending on which dates you look at, that was a 14 to 15 year process. This was not an overnight process. 75, before the Declaration of Independence was even signed, were the first battles and skirmishes between the colonists and England, which those soldiers were called redcoats. But Lexington and Concord, which most people heard about that in their history books, that was 1775 before the Declaration was drafted and signed in 1776. Yorktown, where General Washington defeated General Cornwallis in the Siege of York, didn't occur until 1781, and you've been to Yorktown. We did that for your fifth grade trip? Sixth grade trip.
Miss R.
Yeah. So you've seen some of this.
I have. That also helped getting to see all of this happen, like where it happened, which is an incredible trip, even if you don't like history. It's so cool to see the foundations of our country there. It's very interesting when you think about how widespread it is and how it really just started with a lot of like civil unrest with the taxation getting ridiculous. You know, you and I were talking about this last night when we were discussing this episode about how the whole like Boston Tea Party thing, while you know, we all know about it. We've all heard about it. The whole thing was taxation without, like, no taxation without representation. And I don't think it truly clicked for me what that meant until like 7 months ago. Which you would think that I would have understood that a lot sooner with the amount of American history that is in around my life between you and my teachers and all of those things. But it took me a long time to realize that the no representation part meant they just wanted a seat in Parliament. They just wanted a voice in or they just wanted a voice in how the country was run. They really didn't have as much of an issue with being a part of an entity of England. They just wanted to have a voice in it and not be blindly controlled. And I think that's a great example. It's like, how can so many people who live in England who've never seen the States, never seen the colonies, how can they decide what's best for them if they have no idea what life is for there? What life is like there. It'd be the same thing saying, well, what if the States decided how everything was run in England? But nobody ever went and visited, or not enough people went and visited before they made laws or taxes and things like that. And so it took me a long time. You think I would have figured that out in sixth grade when we went to where everything was happening? But no, it took me until like a year ago to realize, 6 months to a year ago, to realize that's what that meant.
It's awesome. And I think the conclusion that you and I came to last night is the moral of the story is people just want to be heard. At the end of the day, that hasn't changed. People in any country, in any society, in any neighborhood, they want to be heard. And so the colonists felt like we're not getting through to the crown and to the parliament back in England. And so they just finally got to the point that they felt like revolution was the only way to accomplish their goals. And again, there's a lot more to the story, but in context of today, just kind of wanted to talk through that this was not an overnight overnight affair. And check this out. Yorktown, where the British were finally defeated, 1781. Well, it took an additional 2 years before the Treaty of Paris between England and America was formally signed because guess what? We didn't have email. We didn't have text. We didn't have all the rapid, immediate communication. So papers had to be sent back and forth in terms of drafts. Emissaries had to get on a ship and go to Paris and have these talks. And so it took another almost 2 years to sign the actual Treaty of Paris. And
They
then
signed it
it
in
took
Paris.
they signed it in
Was
Paris.
France
Okay.
already in having its revolution during that time, or was that after?
I think that was after, I can't remember when the Bastille was. We'd have to look that up. I want to say that was 1787. But you know from your studies that the French were inspired
Yep.
by the American
Yep.
Revolution. But then check this out. Okay, so the Treaty of Paris, which basically formally ended the American Revolution, it was another 5 years before the colonists were able to draft a complete constitution and get it ratified by all of the colonies. And I think that date was like 1789. Again, the whole process from the initiation of skirmishes and hostilities, so to speak, between the battle at Lexington and Concord, which is called the shot heard round the world, from start to finish, this was about a 14 to 15-year deal to establish the United States of America with a formal government.
Okay, so you said formal government. I love how I'm so uneducated in this, and you're literally just teaching right now. But I love it, and we'll get to 4th of July in a minute. When did Washington become president? Was it before the Constitution? Was it after the Constitution? When did he formally start leading the country? Because it's hard to believe that a country that just left a monarchy and finished a war that half the country was, at odds with, that they didn't want to do it, that they could, as James Madison has said, if men were angels, they wouldn't need government. They needed some kind of government. So when was that created?
That was in conjunction with the Constitution. Don't ask me to quote what year that we actually had our first election. But here's what you need to know in terms of that. The country was operating under something called, what was it prior to the Constitution? Oh, the Articles of Confederation. That's
Yeah.
what it was. But remember that? The
Yeah.
Articles of Confederation. And if you look
I've
at
read
the
them.
language in that was basically the phrase in that is this document lays out, quote unquote, a league of friendship between the 13 colonies. And so they did have a governing document that allowed them to operate, and it wasn't that effective, but it did allow them to at least operate in conjunction as an entity, even though it was 13 colonies that
so the
came
states
together.
the colonies kind of self-ran themselves for those couple of years during that time period
Yes,
until
and
they were united formally. And that was just
yes.
an agreement, a mutual agreement between all of them that they worked as an entity and for the betterment of all of them.
Yes.
Okay,
And you're a
that makes
lot
sense.
quicker than I am. So I saw you looking it up. Tell us when the first election was.
That was not what I was doing. I got it though. I was looking
Where
at the James
is
Madison quote.
where
Where's our intern?
our in-studio assistant?
The first election was held in from December 15th, 1788 to January 7th, 1789 under the new Constitution, which was ratified in 1788. Wow.
There you go.
Guys, I promise you I can read. It was just
Yeah.
really small text.
So again, it was a 15-year process from the beginning of hostilities until the cessation of the war, the signing of the treaty, the complete drafting and ratification of the United States Constitution, and the first election with George Washington. Now, enough of the historical fact, even though that's an interesting discussion.
We could talk about that literally all day.
We could. Let's take it from those are a lot of details, but we're trying to paint a picture. Now let's talk about the actual holiday itself. And besides just eating hot dogs, hamburgers, shooting off fireworks, which I love, it is my favorite holiday. I'm a retired soldier. If you've never been to a 4th of July celebration on a military institution or installation, you are missing out. It's phenomenal.
I've never been.
You've never been, and that's something that I am going to make sure that we get you to. Fort Benning actually used to be my favorite. I loved it when my artillery unit was selected to do the firing of the 50 gun salute on the 4th of July. And there's nothing more that blesses my heart than to participate and even observe a 50 gun salute, because what they do on the 4th of July is they announce each state in the order of admittance into the Union with the date that they ratified the Constitution and became a state. And so it is really a cool deal.
That sounds
Delaware
cool.
is Delaware is the first state off the top of my head. I can't remember. I think they actually ratified the Constitution. I'm not even going to give the date because I don't remember, but I do remember Delaware is the first state. But it's really cool to hear they say, now, ladies and gentlemen, the 50 gun salute to the United States of America, the first state, Delaware. And they announce the date, and then the howitzer goes off, boom, and then they announce the second. It's cool.
That
It is the
sounds really
coolest
cool.
thing ever.
That sounds
So
so cool.
my apologies that you have never been to a military installation for the 4th.
Well, because we're
We are going
usually
to correct
hosting the
that.
4th of July, and so
Yes.
this is the first year we have, or like second year we haven't hosted it. And so, but no, I love 4th of July. I remember as a kid, you used to say if the HOA would have allowed us, you would have spray painted the flag on our front yard, but which I think is so cool. It's becoming a trend of people doing it. I entirely think one year we should just do it and pay the fine. But it's a lot of fun. It's a great time of fellowship because, and I've said it before, and I say this a lot, but and I especially said this with some of the protests going on recently, is, you wouldn't have the freedom to do that if it wasn't for the men and women who died, for you to be able to stand there. And so, we wouldn't have the freedom to celebrate like this if it wasn't for, the Declaration of Independence and our desire to be our own country, and for all of the men who died and fought for that. And so I think that's something really important, is that how we talked about Memorial Day. A lot of people often celebrate it at the lake. A lot of people, like myself, didn't realize that it was to celebrate the fallen. The 4th of July also comes with a day of remembrance, too. We call it 4th of July a lot, but it also has another name, which is Independence Day. And I think that that's super important to remember, is that it's not just a day of the month. It's a part of our history that every single year when it comes back around to it, that's another year that we have successfully been our own independent nation. It's another year that we successfully continue to fight for what we believe in, and fight for the people in it.
Yeah, I think it's great, Eva. And I think that, let's kind of stay in that vein because, I ask you, hey, the big takeaway from this episode is what does being American mean to you? What does independence mean to you? What does living in a free country? What does that mean to you? And I could talk about this off the cuff for the next 6 hours, but let me try to frame some of my immediate thoughts on what it means. Here's the first thing I would say. I don't know of another country that is not defined by its ethnicity or its borders. We're the only country in the world that I know of that is defined by an ideology.
Yeah.
What do I mean by that? You can't really, if you ask me, hey, show me an ethnic American, I can't do it because in reality, we're all immigrants to this country, but the thing that binds us together is an ideology contained in the Declaration of Independence. And we've talked about this. The second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence says,
You mean to read it?
yeah, you can read it.
The starting parts: we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundations on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as they shall not seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Do you want me to keep going, or is that good?
No, that's good.
Yeah.
And so the big key, the words that most of us are taught in high school is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It doesn't guarantee us to be happy. Nobody can do that. God doesn't even guarantee us to be happy. But we recognized as a country in our founding document, hey, everyone has the right to life. They have the right to be free, which is liberty, and they have the right as a free person to pursue whatever it is that makes them happy. And so we just have a very unique country in terms of our founding documents. We've always held those very sacred. You know, the closing. Do you have the closing? You know, I love the closing statement of the Declaration of Let's put context to that. Once we have these opening paragraphs in the Declaration of Independence, then the framers of that declaration, they laid out their grievances against King George the crown in England. That's what the declaration was. Hey, we're going to tell you why we're doing this. It's not something just we came up with at the last minute. We have some grievances. Here they are. And the declaration framers lined that out item by item by item. And then they close with what I think is one of the greatest paragraphs ever written. And what does that paragraph say?
We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are now, and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that the free and independent states, they have the full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
Thank you. I love that last sentence. We pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Honor is a sacred thing. And check this out. 56 men signed that declaration. And here's what people forget sometimes. If this effort had have failed, those 56 men would have been hanged for treason.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And so we owe a debt of gratitude that they were willing to take the risk, that they were willing to take the gamble. And today, you and I and 300, I don't know what the current population is, 320 million, I think, in America, 320 million. We are the beneficiaries of their sacrifice, of their willingness to take the risk for people to be free. And let me say this, and then I'm going to let you comment. This country has really fought 3 wars. We've fought more than 3, but there are 3 that kind of identify who we are as a people. The American Revolution, that war was fought over this ideological concept. Are men able to govern themselves, and do they have that right? And we believe they had the right, but under God. That's the phrase in the Declaration, divine providence. So we fought a war based on the belief that all men should be or have the right to be free. Okay. All men, regardless of race, creed, color. All right. We struggled with that because we had the institution of slavery. So then we fought another war in the 1860s, about 100 years later, the American Civil War, and we fought that war. Okay. Does all mean all, or does it mean some? Okay, that's the second great war that really defined who we are as a country. And we're still struggling with this in a way because we're still trying to identify who we are as a nation, as a people in this thing we call the Great Experiment.
And we were very young, so it makes sense.
We are very young.
But because of technology, it seems like we should have answers just like that. It took 15 years for us to have independence, but technology has distorted our view of how long things should take. And we want change, and people are, speaking out about wanting change, and they expect it to be done overnight, but it takes time to figure something out that works. They even say it in the Constitution. We were reading it. If the current government is not working, the people have the right to fix it and make it better, as long as it maintains the certain rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I'm paraphrasing, but I think that's important to understand too, is that independence in our Constitution, it's a living document. That's something we've talked about a lot in our class. Is it was never, because obviously with the amendments we've seen a lot of change made to it over time, but it's like our country is the great experiment. The American dream is something that everybody wants, but for everybody it looks different. And like you said, we're not defined necessarily by the ethnicity of the people or the culture of the people. A lot of people say Americans have no culture. Well, I think it's because we have a conglomeration of, I think that's the right word, so many different cultures in it.
Conglomeration.
Conglomeration, yeah, there we go, that's the word. But I think it's important to understand is most countries in the world that maybe look down on America or look up to America, they've existed for thousands of years. They've existed for hundreds of years. They've had all of these trial and error periods. And we study them. We study the wars they fought. We study everything that led to what we see now. But America is so incredibly young. We're still figuring it out. And that's what I said about why 4th of July is such a big deal. It's we made it another year and continue to growing to having a more perfect country.
Yep, I love that. So let me finish with the third war. Again, we fought the revolution. All men have the right to be free and to live free. Then we fought a civil war. Does all really mean all? And then about 80 years later, we entered into World War II. Of course, we were attacked by Japan at Pearl Harbor. That's what drew us into that war. But the ideology behind that was Nazi Germany was exterminating the Jewish people. We all know from history that 6 million Jews perished during the Holocaust. Well, the third war that really defined us as a country, we had experimented, hey, does it mean all? And does it mean Americans? Or when it came to World War II, now we fought among ourselves about this idea of freedom. Are we willing to go beyond our borders and fight on others' behalf? And that's when we became involved in Europe. And so anyway, in my opinion, there's three out of the wars that we have fought. There's three wars that kind of define who we are as a people. And I'll say this, one of our faults is in fighting for this idea of freedom and independence. The one thing that we fail to do sometimes is we desire to export freedom. You can't export freedom without the sense of responsibility that goes with it.
Exactly.
And so that's where I'd like to kind of segue and maybe finish this episode in what it means to be an American. I am so privileged to live in this country. And the narrative for me, I know that some people have created a narrative that our country is evil, that our country has done all of these atrocities, different things throughout the years. Every country has failed. You look at any country, people have tried to dominate each other. Politicians have made mistakes, sometimes grievous mistakes. But America at its core has always been a just nation, has been a righteous nation, and that comes into the philosophy that we have in employing our military forces. One of the primary things that we've always evaluated military action is it has to have a just cause. We're not just going to go around the world engaging in a ham scam fashion. It's got to be just for us to get involved, and that's part of why we got involved in World War II. You had an aggressor in Europe that was conquering nations and exterminating people. We decided, basically, again, we were given no choice because we were directly attacked.
Because they were staying out of
Sent
it, right?
our troops. We were trying our best to stay out of it. Hitler invaded Poland in 1939, and we managed to stay out of it for 2 years until the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. But let's not lose the point here. In all of that, we've always wanted the use of force to have a just cause behind it. Again, we just live sometimes in a divisive culture. We've talked about that. I know some people have this narrative that we have become an evil country, and I don't buy it. This country, why are people still trying to get here? There are people beating our door down. And the reason is because this country offers opportunity and freedoms that are found nowhere else in the world. And I'm proud of our country. I'm proud of the men and women who have defended her. And can we continue to get better? Absolutely. We should all strive to be better as Americans, as citizens, as individuals. But I'm never going to buy into the argument that we've become a evil country. This is a great country. It's something to be proud of. It's something to continue to improve. And I am so privileged personally to be part of this great experiment.
I 100% I agree. And it's interesting because obviously, some of my closest friends don't live in the States. And so they have a very skewed perception of what America looks like because they only know what the media talks about. And we get into conversations sometimes and I'm like, no, but you don't hear me. Yes, we have our issues, like every country does. But since our creation of a country, we have always fought for the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. There's never been a doubt about that. Yes, it's taken some time for us to figure out exactly what all of that means and to iron out the creases in some things, but we've never been controlled in a way that compromises those. We've never been led in a way that compromises the three most fundamental truths of our nation. And I think that's something super important is you ask, we've been saying a lot, well, what does it mean to be an American? What does it mean to you? And I think that's different for everyone. But I think the foundation of what it means to be an American is that I have a right to my life here. I have a right to live here, a right to be here. I have the right to own things, to exist under, all of these things like we've talked about. There's always a talk, and I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but when the foundation of our country, there was two opposing parties when they were making the Constitution, the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist, and it was pretty much the argument of the big government and little government. But both parties still always agreed on the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. The question just was, do we elect more people to dictate that, or do we let all of the people have more of a say in it, kind of thing? I think it was just very, very interesting because we've never lost that. You look at England or you look at France, and you and I were talking about this the other night because I was talking about how the philosophy of the Enlightenment really shaped the way countries were run. America has never been at war with itself or with other people in a sense of trying to overthrow our own government. When we had the Civil War, we've talked about these three great wars. The French Revolution was a complete abolishment of the French government because it was corrupt. But we've never seen something like that happen in the American government. We had the Civil War, but it was a war over a societal, social problem and defining what all people were. And I think that there's something super important to understand is that you live in a nation that is a living experiment that is constantly willing to prove itself wrong and say, you know what, we can make this better. It's not, our nation is not stubborn in the sense of just because it was created 300 years ago, the morals, values, and laws of 300 years ago are still completely relevant. That's willing to adapt and change to fit the needs of the people and what they define life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is.
Great thoughts. And so here's what I would say about that. And actually, I was talking about this to a group of men this morning at my small group. As part of the great experiment, I believe in American exceptionalism. That's a whole nother episode. But most of us that are my age have always believed that America has what's called American exceptionalism. And that means because of our way of life, because of the freedoms that we offer for individual initiative, that creates or produces creativity in the marketplace. And we have an ability to solve problems in medicine, in technology, in engineering, you name the field. Americans have led the way for decades because of the freedom of expression and creativity that a free marketplace provides. And so in that, again, we have to be willing to continue to get better. And if we have one area that I think we can improve on, this is what I was talking about to my small group this morning. This was a great moment for me years ago. I was in the Air Force school as an Army officer, and the Air Force guys and the Army guys and the Navy guys were kind of back and forth about geopolitical considerations. And I don't remember what we were talking about in specific that day, but we were talking about Europe and some of our interactions with Europe. And we had two foreign exchange officers, and one of them was an Air Force officer from Sweden. He was the nicest, most calm, rational guy. I really enjoyed the year that I spent with him. And his first name was Hoken, and the dude was about 6'4", 6'5". He was huge. And so we called him the Big Swede, very affectionately. But all of the American officers are having this great geopolitical discussion one day, and I could tell that Hoken was getting a little irritated, but he listened very calmly, very rationally. And then after about 20 minutes, the Big Swede stood up, not raised his hand, not said, hey, I'd like to interject. He stood up in this group of 20 officers in this particular seminar, and he said, and he pointed his finger at us. I'll never forget it. He said, let me tell you Americans something. He said, you always think the rest of the world sees everything like you do, and I am here to tell you that we do not. And I know he used the word we intentionally to include not only his native country of Sweden, but Europe and the other countries of the world. And it was a moment. And then he sat down and never said another word. And the rest of us kind of shut up, and we thought, okay, Big Swede, you have made your point, and you have a very rational, valid point. And to this day, we still struggle with that a little bit. As a young country, I think sometimes other countries see us as arrogant because we have been the dominant player on the world stage. We are still the leader of the free world, but we are a young country. And I think that we make the mistake sometimes that other countries, the rest of the world, sees things like we do, and that's just simply not true.
I completely agree, and I have two points to make on this. It's something I've heard many times, but one of them is, how I said a lot of times people say Americans don't have culture. Well, the question is, how many years did it take for the British culture to start? How much did it take? How many traditions, how many events, how many histories for it to get where it did now? Same thing with Egyptians. They have traditions and quirks, not in a bad way, that have existed for thousands of years. Greeks too. They've historically been very superstitious people, but that dates back thousands of years, and that's part of their culture. Because it's been thousands of years of different leaders, different type of rule, different types of people, the growth of technology. Ours is still growing. Like, it's not that Americans lack culture. It's just that it's so young. It's still growing. It's still developing. And I've heard this a lot, especially in regards to mission trips. It's, it makes no sense to me why a bunch of, white Americans go to this country and try and save these people. What if they don't want to be saved? What if they don't, or what if, and things like that. Not like even like in a mission trip in a biblical sense, like just in a humanitarian trip and things like that. The question was, well, why are Americans going out there to try and spread the American dream to a country that is nowhere, shape, or form prepared for that? And I think that's something that what you just said, it's a great point in regards to it, is, these countries have existed for thousands of years, hundreds and thousands of years, that they aren't going to change everything to do it the way we do it, because to them, we are still an experiment. We're still unstable. We're still trying to figure it out. And so you were saying how the military is very selective with what they involve themselves in because it has to be for a just cause. I think it's a great example of the balance between just wanting to spread freedom and wanting to assist countries who are pursuing it themselves. Like with how America helped assist France in that sense. How they had the embassies there and things like that. It wasn't that they went to France and said, all right, we're going to help y'all be free because you're under a monarchy. It said, you're already fighting for this, so let us help you, kind of thing. And so I think that's just a very important conclusion to understand too, is it's what you say, the same thing about money. You can have anything you want, just not everything. It's the same thing with the American freedoms too, is you can have all the freedom you want in America, but that doesn't mean everybody in the world can. And because they're not all ready for that, they don't all want that. And so you can't I feel like Americans are very prideful in the sense of a lot of them think that we're inherently right all the time, but that's because the country of our foundation was built for the people to be raised in a country that fully understands what life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness means.
And so to your point, as we wrap this up, I believe that our country, our method of government, what we have constructed, I think it's the best in the world. There's no other country that I would want to live in. We just got back from two countries that I admire, that I really enjoyed the people. I enjoyed learning about their culture, their traditions, but I have no desire to live in either one of those countries. I'm not a citizen of either one of those countries. I'm a citizen of this country. And again, I believe it's the best in the world, even though it has faults. But here's the thing that we have to keep in mind that I think you and I have kind of talked directly and indirectly to. Just because we believe our system of government is the best and it's the most effective and it's the most creative in terms of creating spaces for just initiative and ingenuity in the marketplace, that does not make us better than the rest of the world.
Yep.
And it's the same thing with American exceptionalism. I think sometimes people think, well, if you believe in American exceptionalism, you believe you're better than the rest of the world. No, I don't. And as a Christian, I personally believe God loves every person in every part of the world equally, regardless of what their religious upbringing was, regardless of what their current beliefs are. God loves an Italian, a Greek, an Egyptian, an Iranian just as much as an American, and he places equal value on them as a creation because he created each one of them uniquely, and we are no better than any one of those people that I mentioned from those nations. But nonetheless, I still believe in our system of government. It's the best that the earth has ever seen. And then to close it out,
You're
but
proud to
none
be an
of it
American.
is ever going to work. I am so proud
Yeah,
to be
it's
an
a song.
American, but I will say, yeah, it's a song, but I will say this. I don't care what system of government that you have and that you adhere to. None of it is going to work properly without a reliance on, as the Declaration said, divine providence.
Yep.
None of it is going to work without a belief in God and recognizing who God is as the ultimate creator and master of the universe. None of it. I don't care what country you live in. None of it is going to work without God. But
I completely
yes,
agree.
I am so proud to be an American, and happy 4th of July, everybody. And I think this is a good place to wrap this one up. And so, regardless of what happens, let's
Let's
always
always
remember,
remember.
let's be able to talk
From
from generation
generation to
to
generation.
generation.
I feel like that's such an amusing part of our episodes. It's just how bad we fail at our inline. But anyway, if you like this episode, if you like us, you can check out our socials. We're on YouTube at the Generation to Generation podcast. We're on Instagram at G2G_podcast. We're on Facebook at Generation to Generation. We have our link tree. You can literally find us on any platform. Our recordings of these episodes go up on YouTube. That was really hard to do. It's been a minute since I've said all of that. But if you have anything you want us to talk about, there are ways for you to reach out to us, especially on the podcast hosting apps. It often says if you have a topic or a question, you text us. You're welcome to send us any feedback you want to hear, or any feedback on the episode, or any questions you want to hear, because we run out of topics all the time. And keep your eyes out, because we're reintroducing ourselves and our podcast in the next couple of weeks.